here's a question for you. Why does our government and civil service want to hide the true scale of migrant crime in this country? Is it because the data might show that not everyone who comes here from abroad is a doctor or an architect? High-functioning countries such as Denmark, they publish data on migrant crime rates all the time, and there's no reason that we can't. In the absence of the government doing its job here, at least some of our journalists are. Because in the Daily Telegraph today, it's revealed foreigners are convicted up to a quarter of sex crimes in this country, despite census data showing foreign nationals make up just over 9% of the population. Completely disproportionate. In the first data analysis of its kind from the Centre for Migration Control, up to 1 in 4 sexual offences are committed by migrants. That's 1 in 4 sexual offences in this country committed by migrants. 2 nationalities in particular, Afghans and Eritreans, were more than 20 times more likely to account for sexual offence convictions than British citizens. And overall, foreign nationals were 71% more likely than Brits to be responsible for sex crime convictions. Drilling into the data drawn from the Police National Computer, it shows there were 17,700 convictions for sexual offences carried out by someone with a known nationality between 2021 and 2023. And the highest numbers of sex offence convictions were accounted for by Romanians, 987, Poles, 208, Indians, 148, and Pakistanis on 144. However, the rates, based on convictions per 10,000 of the population, put Afghans with 77 convictions at the top, with a rate of 59 per 10,000. That's 22.3 times that of Britons. They were followed by Eritreans, who accounted for 59 convictions at a rate of 53.6 per 10,000 of their population. Britons, meanwhile, accounted for 12,000 sex offence convictions, representing a rate of 2.66 per 10,000 of their population in England and Wales. Far, far lower. So it begs the question again, why is our government so lacklustre and so reluctant to publish migrant crime data? And the other question is it time for an emergency shutdown of Britain's borders until we sort this problem out? Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the journalist and broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth, and the former chairman of the Conservative Party, Sir Jake Berry. Good evening to you all.
Hello.
Nice to see you all again. It's been a while.
And you too.
Benjamin, what do you make of this rather startling data? Is this the reason why the government is so reluctant to publish migrant crime data? Because it shows that they are disproportionately bigger sex offenders than Brits.
Well, this isn't a defence, but I would point out that it's likely that these figures are slightly exaggerated because the number that are convicted is a solid number that we know, whereas actually the numbers of people from these nationalities in the country is probably higher than we actually think, because there's lots of people in Britain that we don't know are in Britain.
Much lower than you actually think. That's tosh.
No. There's more people from these countries than we have officially documented. So there is a bit of context to that, and that's what the Home Office...
Well, at least you admit that there's loads of illegals here who aren't accountable.
I mean, yes, I'm just pointing out that slightly distorts the figures because we don't know the real number in the country. But look, I don't have a problem with publishing the data because, that's the public interest. I'm a journalist, things should be in the public domain. But the question is, what use would this actually serve to solving the problems? Would it be fair, for example, that an Afghan who has put his life on the line serving Allied forces when we were in Afghanistan... I'll finish. When we were in Afghanistan, would it be fair to say to a man that had risked his life for helping British troops, the translator, no, you can't come to Britain because of these stats?
You're making
I don't think it would.
Nobody's saying Afghanis can't come to Britain because of these stats. But
I think what is the point? Because what is the point in knowing it's disproportionately higher if you're not then going to stop migrants from those countries?
What's the point?
Right. The point is that I'm sick of being told that this dream of multiculturalism works in this country. It does not work, and this proves it. You mentioned that 23% of all sex crimes are committed by foreign nationals and other unknown nationals. This is despite census data that says that it's foreign nationals make up just 9.3% of the population, which actually messes up his things. But the bottom line is here, that multiculturalism doesn't work. We're getting a lot of people from all the countries that you mentioned who are vastly different culturally and in terms of values than Britain, and they're coming here and they're exercising their rights. In this country, women women are equal to men. They're allowed to bring their talents to the table. They're safe. They're respected. That is not the case with a lot of cultures that are coming here, and we see it. There was an interesting fact. I've got to read this. It's the Economist Democracy Index, which said only 24 of the 167 countries they looked at were classed as full democracies. Of the remaining 145, 59 were fully authoritarian. Now, let's look at what authoritarian means. That means the vast majority of Muslim countries are authoritarian. And we know what it's like for women in a lot of those cultures and religions, because in those cultures, they have the rule of law, religion and culture is all intertwined.
Yeah.
It's not here.
Okay.
And this, to me, is dangerous for women. And what we're doing is we're not allowed to get rid of these foreign criminals who commit crimes. And so we're putting their rights and their needs above the rights of British women. And that's not right.
Okay. So, Jake Berry, why didn't your party, the previous government, why doesn't this government, what is the reluctance to show migrant crime data when other sane-thinking countries, Denmark, Scandinavia, they do it without problem?
We'd hardly say Denmark and Scandinavia as a bastion of the far right, would you? Not least Sweden has had a history of very left-wing governments. Look, I think it's great pity that the Conservative government had 14 years to do this and didn't do it, so I'm not going to try and defend that.
Well, didn't Robert Jenrick try when he was...
Well, actually, did he? I mean, there was a vote in Parliament and I rebelled against the government and voted in favour of releasing this information. I was told off by the government whips at the time, but at least I'm consistent on it. I think like Benjamin, I think it is the right thing for this information
at the time?
To be released. I think it was Rishi at the time. Another thing Rishi got wrong. But, so I voted to have this information released when I was an MP in Parliament. And it's because it's the right thing to do. And the reason there is the resistance to doing this, and I think it comes from the civil service more than government, although government should be brave and do this, is that since 1997, we have been sold this fairy story, this lie, this sort of nirvana of a multicultural Britain. And it makes... Well, I'm agreeing with the Corrie, should be pleased. It makes Britain a worse place to live. And the point I would make is that anything in those intervening years that was against that almost religion that the public sector had, that we should pursue this multicultural Britain road, you were called a racist. Well, I think and that's why these figures weren't released, because people who talked about them would be called racist.
We have to accept that there is evil as well as good in diversity and multiculturalism, and we see the evil in these figures.
OK. Well, how many doctors and architects and heart surgeons are worth rapists and sex offenders? What's the trade-off?
Yeah, but that's a ridiculous way to look at it.
Why?
If somebody's a qualified doctor, then I think that's sufficient evidence that they're probably an upstanding person. Yes. We should take them in. We need them. Indeed, 2/3 of doctors that came here that we qualified last year were from outside the country.
So what do we say to British women?
Hang on, there is useful stuff you can do with this. The number one foreign nationality in British prison is Albanian.
Yep.
Now, the reason so many of those come across, or were coming across in boats, is because the illegal drugs trade in Britain is controlled by mafia-like Albanian gangs. There is an obvious correlation. But should that affect a qualified doctor who wants to move to Yorkshire? Well, no, of course
not.
not.
I'm more concerned about sex offenders than Albanians who grow cannabis in warehouses.
The easiest thing we could do is, if you are a foreign national in this country and you commit a sex crime, you are deported immediately. There should be no argument. I don't know why it's the quickest, easiest thing to do. Why wouldn't we deport people coming here who commit sex crimes against British women? Why?
Well,
and that's the problem now. We have a justice system that is slewed in favour of every single foreign national who
Labour
comes to this country.
Carol, Labour would say, if they were here, if anyone from the Labour Party were here, they'd say deportations are at record highs. We've got, 30% year on year. But what they're doing is they're picking low-hanging fruit, such as Vietnamese nail bar workers, who, quite frankly, they might be here illegally, but they're causing nobody any harm. In fact,
but also,
they're
all causing harm.
Nails. And they're letting in. Have
you seen the nails?
They're letting in Hamas sympathisers like Abu Wadeh, who thankfully has been nicked today. They're letting in sex offenders. And
half of those numbers wanted to go anyway.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
complete distortion of the fact, those numbers.
I mean, look, there are, going back to my point, which was right, there are more people in this country than we know about. And you can see that in the data when you look at things like sales in supermarkets, when you look at COVID vaccine demand, it was higher than the numbers we had. So there's all sorts of real data showing that there are more people here than we know about. That's why we need ID cards. But the idea that all of this means that diversity is a weakness.
Tony Blair.
Diversity is a strength. Earlier today...
it is not.
It is.
No, it's
Hang
not.
on, doesn't mean...
have to accept that, like I just said before, there is evil as well as good in diversity and multiculturalism. And when you have people coming from cultures that do not marry up with this culture, you have a problem. At least the British women have a problem in this country.
But that doesn't mean that somehow we should shut the door to immigration. You've got these crazy ideas, like the petition that's heard at Parliament tomorrow, that we should end migration for 5 years. Well, I'll tell you, I looked at the 20 richest people in Britain, the 20 richest British citizens. 13 of them are immigrants. There are more money...
And where did they get their wealth?
There is more money...
Was it created in this country?
Yes, there's more money generated in this money
Such as who?
by Indians, people born in India that live in Britain, than people born in Britain.
Benjamin, there's this myth...
The truth is, look, this is nonsense. You can pick up highly successful individuals who probably find a way to come to this country anyway. You know, the truth is, through uncontrolled migration, we are importing attitudes to this country that went out in medieval times.
And isn't that the problem?
And women are being attacked in the streets because of it. 17%, according to these figures, of all drugs crime is committed by foreign nationals. And Benjamin says, yes, a lot of them are here and we don't know about them. Of course, but we're only talking about the people who've been caught. Think about those hidden individuals that we don't even know are in this country, committing crimes, sex crimes, drug crimes, not being caught. What we've got to do is have a massive clampdown on immigration. I actually agree with the stop it for 5 years while we work out what's going on.
Calm down, immigration. We've also got to stop pretending that immigration, the only way this country can function is with immigration. It's not true.
It's making us poorer.
Growth now is on the ground. 20 years ago, before the numbers started coming, economic growth was booming. So it's just rubbish to say
GDP per capita is in the gutter. We've had this myth for years and years that we need migrants to grow the economy because we're too stupid to do it otherwise. GDP per capita, the truest litmus test of whether people's lives are getting better, is in the gutter and it's contracting all the time. So it just
that's not because of immigration.
Yes, it is.
It's not. It's because we've had basically stagnant wages for skilled labour, let alone unskilled labour, since 2008. And those skilled labour figures, you know, are overwhelmingly British-born people, and their wages haven't gone up. So it's wrong to base that.
What we need to do is, instead of spending billions on immigrants, we need to spend billions training up people in this country to do the jobs that need doing.
This country would be on its feet without immigrants. We get so much money without Arabian and Indian investment in this country. We'd have very little.
Why don't you believe in Britain? Why do you not think Britain can do well?
In Britain, and I'm glad that the great and the good from around the world want to help build Britain.
Everyone coming on those boats is going to be working in the National Service, surely? Because they're not.
Well, we've got 150,000 spaces in the care sector.
It makes us poorer.
They're not, no.
This uncontrolled immigration is making us poorer. Now we know it's also making our streets unsafe. We have to do something about it.
It's good to know the arsonist is an expert in...
By the way, Benjamin, Britain existed long before the uncontrolled mass migration, and it's an insult to the people that built this country and grafted. I'm not going to go into it, because I think you've frankly quite insulted half the nation there. So, yeah, there we go.
Well, the other half later.
90% of the nation. It's only 9%.
90%. Right, a government spokesman has said we are committed to delivering justice for victims and safer streets for our communities. Any foreign nationals who commit heinous crimes should be in no doubt. We'll do everything to make sure they are not free on Britain's streets, including removal from the UK at the earliest possible opportunity.
Unless they're kids.
Yeah, and if you believe that, you also believe in the tooth fairy.
Exactly.